Hi guys, it's Luton here, and we're back for another Battlefield Roundtable. Now, obviously, this week we've got the PS4 release date. It's going to be talking a little bit about that. We're also going to be talking about Endgame and other Battlefield topics. So, with the PS4, there's a lot of details and stuff announced there, but I think one of the main things people really want to be talking about is specs, all these kind of comparable things. I think it's pretty good that we've got all you guys here, the PC players. Obviously, I'm a console player at the moment. But should we just jump straight in with the first thing we were just talking about there was the sort of spec. So, feel free to just go wild with that, guys.
Well, here's my question. I've had consoles before. I'm a PC player due to the limitless opportunities to upgrade, get better frames, get better graphics, and piece it together as you go. So for me, what does it take to attract a PC player? Right, a dedicated PC player. For me, I'd want to see something like locked in 60 frames at least, right, to take advantage of that. Maybe plug and play mouse and keyboard out the gate because I can't use a controller. It's a glorified paperweight for me because I suck at things.
I mean, there are some games now that will support keyboard and mouse, but I really feel like it's something that's so irritating, and it should be allowed. I mean, yeah, go on, mate. Anyway,
Yeah, and that's the thing is it's what in marketing it's what can I do to take market share and what can I do to keep market share, right? So what does it take to get at the heart of some of these PC gamers? Because Dastro's a PC gamer too. And we live this nice lifestyle of we can change our computers through the years, piece by piece, to keep up with the trend and keep on top of the brand new graphics and the capabilities of these games. That's nice. So for me to be able to make this easy transition of pulling out my mouse and keyboard and sticking it on the PlayStation 4, that would be awesome if that was a capability.
do you think if they had that capability, you would like seriously consider it and sort of, I mean,
Yes, I would.
You would, and the graphics. So, I mean, one thing that people always push is the graphics, and I had a few people say this to me on Twitter this evening while we we're watching the stream from PlayStation, going, "Oh, the graphics this, the graphics that, blah blah blah." Now, all of us are fairly sort of senior gamers, I'll say that, but we remember the days when graphics were really, nowhere near where they are now.
I played Tecmo Bowl where everything was a block.
Exactly.
I don't care. I do care about graphics, but in Battlefield 4, Dash was probably the same way. We play on cookies, on cutout and cardboard mode.
Yeah.
Everything low just to get the extra frames.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the thing, really, I think, where we go is the kind of performance level, the kind of smoothness, how you actually feel, what you get out of a system. And I often feel like the dynamics, mechanics of a game are so much more important than all the graphic stuff. Sure, you want it to look really nice, but most modern games do look nice nowadays. I mean, there's very few that I could look at and go, wow, that looks awful, for the majority, And I think the thing is as well, when you look at these, this is like first generation gaming, the stuff that they showed tonight. It's like the first games coming for the PS4, and the ones that they showed tonight really were amazing, the graphics there, and these are only the first ones. I mean, something to remember with consoles, yeah, sure, the system's limitations, but the developers have a lot of time to work with it and really sort of optimize and maximize what they can get out of the system over time. Now, it's absolutely true that with PCs over time you can upgrade them and stuff, but they didn't really talk a lot about cost. That was one thing they didn't talk about, was the price and anything. They didn't also go into many specifics when it comes to spec and things. I think tonight's kind of stream, it felt very much to me like a kind of look and feel almost. They were really focusing on like the kind of sort of the cloud sort of mind of sort of this is all the stuff that's going to be in the games and all this sort of thing. It was very much kind of visuals and not so much technical spec. But Daska, what do you think? Yeah, go on.
On the topic of specs themselves, they did mention that they are going towards the x86 architecture, which for those that don't know is the same architecture that Xbox 360 was based off, what PC games are based off.
Yeah.
And that is a huge deal. And we take this in consideration with the fact that EA's CEO just a week ago made a comment that he is looking forward towards next generation consoles because he views that the development costs associated with developing for those specific platforms will be significantly lower relative to the current generation consoles. And to me, what that means is that we're going to see a PlayStation 4, a next generation Xbox, and a PC that are all going to be using the same architecture, all like x86. You may have different graphics cards in terms of capabilities, and there was rumors that PS4 would have an APU as opposed to a GPU, which would be sort of a combined GPU CPU capability within. Separate from their CPU itself. But nonetheless, though, it means that it's going to be a whole lot easier for developers to put out games and to patch things and update things because you don't have essentially two different architectures to worry about. They are abandoning their cell processor mindset that they were focusing on so much for PS3 and now joining the herd, so to speak, for the new x86 architecture.
One thing I just drop in here was that I actually said this earlier in the week. It was a quote I used from Edge magazine. There was a quote here, and it said that basically Sony said, they actually came out and said that they made a mistake in creating such esoteric architecture for the PS3, and they said it's a strategy for PS4 that they've changed this now that gives developers more opportunities this time around, partly because they've made it more PC-like in its makeup. So.
Well, I mean, we have to go back to the days of Blu-ray versus HD DVD. Sony knows from their past 30 years of experience that if they can control a proprietary format, which in this case they tried with PS3, they can conceivably make a whole lot of money for a long time because they own the intellectual property associated with that proprietary format. They made a gamble with PS3. It didn't work out that well because the developers had to make a choice and say, well, do I put a lot of effort into PS3 and the Xbox 360 and the PC market, or do I make a compromise?
Yeah, it's been really complicated, and I think it's one of the things that does let down titles when you see these kind of massive differences. But Jake, what do you think when it comes down to spec and all this kind of stuff? Is the PS4, is it going to be something that convinces you? Would you consider getting that? Would you consider getting an Xbox? Are you kind of on board with Rival that if they gave you kind of mouse and keyboard support? What are the most important things for you when it comes to considering these sort of systems?
See, I can play with a controller. It's never really bothered me a ton. I don't like it, but I can do it. So that's not a huge issue. But if I had the ability to plug my keyboard in, obviously I would take that over your generic controller. Because if there's one thing that really bothers me when I watch console gameplay, it's just how sluggish everything looks. It's just like they're moving and they slowly turn around. I can't handle that. It's just it drives me nuts. But I think the one thing that'll hold me back from initially even considering getting one of these, because I've thought about this a lot, isn't necessarily like the graphics and like the fancy stuff like that, because that's not really a huge issue. I mean, I play on low too. Doesn't bother me. I mean, it's not a big deal. But what I think would hold me back was the customability, like going in, like let's say I want to move my mini map closer to the middle of the screen. Can I do that on a console? Probably not. And I think that's going to be one of the huge limitations to the consoles, not necessarily like the graphics and stuff like that, because that's not going to bother me. But the fact that I can't go in and change certain things, how much could we change mouse sensitivity? Let's say they do give us support for that kind of stuff. Is there going to be like, really in-depth customability in terms of like mouse sensitivity and key mapping, stuff like that? So
see, this is a lot of the things that kind of me, I mean, I'm a console gamer, right? But over the last months, I've been sort of talking to people, playing. I've spoken to Rival about this, spoken to Level Cap about this, spoken to Dasker about this, I believe. I've talked about sort of planning, getting myself a PC. And the thing is, what kind of bugs me a bit is that the whole kind of, you see it everywhere all the time. In fact, I remember seeing it when I was at school. People still arguing PC console, and this was like sort of 15 or more years ago. When I was at high school, and. But what it really comes down to, people always take such a simplistic argument towards it. It's always just like the graphics are better, or these kind of things. It's all the architecture of it that really matters the most to me, and the kind of things that in the works Jake is saying here is really relevant. The stuff about the mouse sensitivity, the fact that when you go into the setup, you can really customize so many different features, and all of these kind of things. Those are the important things. Those are the things that actually make a difference to your gaming. The graphics, sure, it's a nice thing, but it's not the most important thing. I mean, Rival, would you want to see more than mouse and keyboard? Would you want to see all these kind of extra layers of detail? I mean, if they're going to take the time and so on to create these astonishing looking games that we've seen kind of so far, and they're talking about all these big ideas that they have for kind of cross-platform and mobile gaming and multiple and all this sort of stuff, and involving other people, there must be a lot of other things that so far PC can do that these consoles can't.
It's what they're doing is they're blurring the lines, the hard, stagnant lines between what PCs and consoles are. You have the share feature, which is basically live streaming, right? You can do that from a console now without introducing extra parts.
Yeah.
The PC world, we've been able to do that forever, right? Because we just plug in a new part or our DX story. We could do it software or hardware-wise. But I think it would be nice, and I think the way they are going is for more options. And that's what it's about. What makes you feel comfortable? What do you like? And being able to adapt that into the console format.
Yeah, and I think something that people forget is the kind of positives when it comes to consoles. And there are a lot of positives. Sure, there's some things that people don't like, but there are positives. One of them is that when you buy the system, when you buy it, you know that every title they release on there will always work to its sort of max specifications. You know, you never have to think, oh, will this work? Will this not work? You just buy the game. It's ready to go every single time. You also know that, you know, I mean, some of the prices that I've sort of seen floating around, and I think they didn't talk about price tonight, but I know that
I think it's 400-ish is what I've been seeing.
They're talking about $400 at release. Now,
That's cheap.
Yeah, $400 at release. That is
That
cheap
doesn't even get
money.
you that gets you a high-end video card for PC. That's one part.
Exactly. Now, this is really the point. It's not. It doesn't come down to the argument of which system is better, but you've got to be. I mean, especially in today's
It's what appeals to the masses and can appeal to the masses from a money standpoint and a performance standpoint, right?
Yeah.
Because of course you could take $3,000 of parts and cram them into a console, but it'd still be $3,000 worth of parts. Who can afford that?
Yes, exactly.
Right. So this has to appeal to high schoolers, middle schoolers, college lads, everybody. So what's the dollar point? 400, 500. They're probably taking a loss on the system to offset it with market growth and sales through some of this other stuff that they're going to be doing, such as games. They get a chunk of the games because it's their platform.
And to X Factor's point, while they did not say this within the presentation, there was sort of an implication that there would be some kind of always online factor to it. I'm not going to say it's a requirement, but I suspect that online will be more important than ever. And what that means for both software developers and for Sony is that it allows them to pursue an alternative distribution model to the status quo. Yeah. And that is huge because, I mean, going back to getting to the most recent Electronic Arts annual report, they talk about how that they love putting out DLCs. They love putting out online content generally because their margins are so much higher. So they can cut out that middleman. They can cut out that brick and mortar store that's selling a game and simply transfer via the internet those given files. And if the consoles can take those files because they have more hard drive space and they have more capability and more people have broadband access, that's going to put more money in the game developers and the
higher profitability.
Oh yeah, it's a big deal.
Yeah,
I was going to say one competitive edge that I didn't notice because I watched the whole thing. I don't know why, but is that they talked about how you can actually demo games.
Yes, that's
in
amazing.
real time. Just like you go in there and you click on it, and you can demo the game. You don't have to download it.
Yes,
it's just like
there. It's not a chopped up version, which is nice.
Yeah, that's a big thing. It's really
kind of a
thing.
compromise. If they are going to kind of cut the strings on used game, is like, well, okay, well, it's not a huge risk. I can try the game ahead of time. If I like it, then I can buy it. As opposed to like with used games with me, I've always bought it if I was like skeptical. It's like, okay, I'll just buy the used copy.
Well, I'll tell you something else as well. They also mentioned they've mentioned about indie games. They've mentioned about free to play games as well. So this is something else to think about. Perhaps, although they may be removing the whole kind of pre-owned aspect, and I also said, whilst I said it'd be really nice for Sony to be able to say, yeah, you can do pre-owned, I have a feeling personally that if Xbox are going that way, they will go that way too, because I think they absolutely know that it's something that they don't really want. We already know that Sony hate the concept of pre-owned games, so I would be not at all surprised if they also took that right out of there. But when it comes to this whole demo thing and so on, it's a really amazing thing. In fact, literally only this week, I posted a video talking about the whole fact that we don't see so many demos anymore. There's a few for your sort of main titles, and you have some betas and stuff like that, but you don't really see so many demos, not like you used to. But the other thing to remember is the sort of downloadable games. When you have stuff like Steam, all right, and things like this, and the PlayStation Network store, there's a lot of kind of smaller game titles out there which are not expensive. We're talking £10, which would be like $15, $20, whatever. So they're small amounts of money, and yet you get huge amounts of enjoyment out of them, or even less, like £5 would be $10. Okay, there's multiple games that I have right now on my PlayStation, which are just downloaded from their store. They're small, kind of independent titles, smaller studios, but they're amazing fun and huge replay value. So whilst, okay, you might be able to get sort of cheaper, AAA titles pre-owned, you might be able to sort of, there's a lot more kind of quality in these smaller games now, and I think that's something that shouldn't be ignored. It's something for people to bear in mind. It just obviously means that, kind of pre-owned, you might be able to pick up some of these much larger titles. But then again, when they're in store, they're not always so cheap anyway.
Yeah, one thing I'd add is at least when you look at the major resellers of games within the United States, like GameStop's the biggest one out there. When you actually dig into how they run their business and where they make their money, it's all on the used games. They make a little bit of money selling new consoles and a little bit of money selling peripherals and new games themselves, but most of their earnings comes from those used games. And so the PlayStation's in a very sort of delicate position, because if they go too far and say, well, we're going to ban used games, or we're going to create certain limitations in it, then you could very well see GameStop start to close down left and right because they're no longer profitable.
Yeah.
And then they're at sort of a dilemma, because many of these stores are what many traditional console gamers use to find new games, to play new games, to buy new games. And if they don't have that, they better have a good, or Sony better have a good business case in terms of describing what that transition is going to look like to get this current generation and future generations of console gamers to shift to an all online capability.
Well, I've got to tell you, we'll move straight onto the Battlefield stuff in a moment, but just to kind of link to that, and I think Rival will be interested by this as well. I don't know the state of sort of US gaming stores and how they're faring. Do you know, Rival, how they're kind of faring? Has there been much kind of... But I will, struggling.
Any of the movie stores, gaming stores, the box stores, they're struggling.
Yeah.
Just simply because of the internet and the way it's been manipulated and whatnot for these online stores. It's so convenient. How convenient is it to buy a game on Steam, go rock the download for a couple hours, play something else, have that game show up, you never left your house.
Yeah, definitely. And I've got to tell you, right, over here in the UK, two of our biggest retailers, right, Game, which is a major, it just sells computer games, and they were in administration earlier this year. They managed to salvage it, had some investors, they cut a load of their assets out and so on and so on. They sacked loads of people, they closed loads of stores, they hang on there by their bare teeth. HMV is another massive store. It's an institution in the UK. It's been around here for years and years, 20, 30 years more. I don't know how long it's been here forever. They also were looking at kind of administration earlier this month. They managed to they struck a bit of a deal. Again, same thing, close the smaller stores, what have you. But
will they survive a second round?
I know, this is the point. And, I felt really bad. I was like, Jesus Christ, where the hell I'm going to be going either to supermarkets to get my games or Amazon.
7-Eleven.
Yeah, seriously, you're really screwed down to the wire, and it really worries me a lot, to be honest. I think it will inevitably in the future. We're going to see these stores go down. I don't see how they're going to manage to survive.
The days of getting a game on a CD or DVD are limited.
Yeah, I think
you won't
it's
be able to buy a physical copy anymore within a couple years. It's just obsolete.
Yeah, and also this will tie in very nicely to their kind of, their non-favor for pre-owned games. I mean, it'll be a case that you download it, it's going to be sort of, obviously locked to your system and so on and so on. But I think, as the internet continues to improve, people are constantly having better broadband. 60 meg, 50 meg download speeds is not uncommon now in sort of major urban areas. So I think it's all part and parcel. It ties in as well with my kind of future of gaming video we did a little while ago. But anyway, let's move on now to sort of Battlefield talk. So with all this kind of talk about PS4 and the future and all these kind of things, we've seen the kind of quality of the graphics, the level of the sort of, how these systems are running. It seems fair to me that I would not be at all surprised if the upcoming consoles are going to be running Battlefield 4 at the kind of spec and the kind of... I think one of the major things that people wanted was player count. Now, do you guys think it would be sort of almost taken as read at this point that they're going to have much higher player counts for consoles on Battlefield?
Oh, yeah.
They have to.
Yeah, you can't go, 6 years in between consoles?
Yeah.
And not up lobby sizes?
I think people... More,
I think they'll get hanged for that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's already like a ghost town on there now. I mean,
yes.
I don't think people would be willing to sit through another Battlefield 3 type maps, because I mean, you can't play half the maps on console.
It kills me, it really does, and it's a huge concern for Endgame. I was just like, once the guy gets on a motorbike on Endgame and console, there's gonna be nobody to stop him. It'll be like
crazy.
He'll be home
go
and
do
drive.
laps. Go find people.
Seriously,
everyone keeps calling the Endgame maps racetracks.
It's gonna be. I have to say, for Endgame, I'm not hateful. It's just gonna be Armored Kill all over again. It's gonna be like, on Armored Kill, I could happily get on a quad bike and cap 3 bases without seeing another player. Seriously, I swear to God. So I know it's gonna happen. We'll see. One thing that I would say was that from some of the maps that I saw for Endgame, the kind of, I haven't got the names, but the sort of wind farm one and so on. You've got these kind of cluster points of sort of buildings, and I think that might fare better for console than some maps, because you've got these kind of localized areas, so you might find that you have kind of smaller battles happening around these kind of things.
Those maps are surprisingly large.
Yeah, they really are. And I've always said that on console, maybe making the best of a bad job here, but I've always kind of said that you get kind of a completely different style of gameplay, and you get these kind of smaller fights over certain areas just because that's the only thing you can do. But I mean, Dasco, what do you reckon about these new kind of endgame maps when it comes to this kind of stuff? And
well, I think you're right. It will likely be armored kill all over again for the console users. But I do have hope, though, that with next generation console, with all the memory that's going to be in PS4 and purportedly within the new Xbox offering, that we won't just see 64-man servers across the board. We'll see something much larger, something close to 100 to 120 player servers, that kind of thing. And it's because when you actually start looking into the reasons why DICE made the maps so much smaller and made the player count so much smaller within the current generation console offerings, it was really because the amount of memory available on these current generation consoles was simply not enough to capture all these different elements of gameplay and the sheer quantity of things going on combined with the size of the map. And we've seen communities out there that have done more than 64-player servers on PC. They've done 100-person servers on PC, and it works just fine for a vast majority of people because they got enough memory to do it.
I was going to say, we already saw in a tech demo tonight for the PS4 as well, was that million cube block drop. Did you see that? When they had 1 million cubes blocked on an area of a
that's
map,
crazy,
and dropped that all at the same time, all in real time, and the whole thing just goes down with perfect physics. That was amazing.
It reminded me of when I saw somebody drop 2,000 cheese wheels in Skyrim off a mountain.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like, who thinks of this shit?
It leads me on to a good question, though. When Dasco's talking about 100 players, and Jake and Rival, what do you think? When is it too much? When is it too many players? Because think about it.
It all scales. It's all based on map design, map layout, functionality within the map, the armor that you get within the map. Because in certain games it works, in PlanetSide 2 that works, but that might not work in Battlefield 4.
It may not work in Battlefield 4 Metro.
Yeah, no,
it doesn't work on half the maps with 64. Honestly,
yeah. 48 is the cap on a lot of the maps. Like Sane, Bazaar. Metro 48 is nice, and the explosions, the RPGs 320s, that really takes the fun out of it. And that's why I think there are so many popular non-explosive Metro servers, because your screen shaking 24/7 just sucks.
Yeah, you can't aim or look at anything. I mean, something that fusses me, I mean, a lot of people have said like 64 players, you get an experience like you hadn't on anything else. On the other hand, there's a lot of people, like you're saying, say that for the majority of the maps with that quantity of people, it can become a real problem. But I do think it's good that with the DLCs, they've kind of expanded and given options there, so it allows you to kind of open these things up. Something that I'd spoken about before, I spoke about with Level, I think. We were talking about the idea that going forward into Battlefield 4, do you think that maps should have specific ticket counts or anything, or could there be some... It's a very difficult thing to do because obviously you go from map to map and things change. But do you think there's some kind of rationale there for sort of looking at...
ratio. I think for Rush, there should be a hard lock ratio. If it's X amount of players, here's your ratio. If you double the players, that ratio travels with the player count, right? And I think that'd make it better, because these high-ticket Rush servers that exist, how do you not win that, right? It's only a matter of time. If you have 200 tickets on Rush Attack, you're not going to get the MCOM.
Yeah, unless you're playing
64 players, it's just not doable sometimes.
And let's remember that in Battlefield 2, every map had 3 different map sizes. And if they could do it in Battlefield 2, I think that if they put a little effort into it, they should be able to do scalable map offerings in Battlefield 4. I mean, we've seen a little bit of it in Conquest vs. Conquest Large, but they could create a 16, a 32, a 64, or even a 100-person player size scalability, because it's all the same map. It's just going larger and larger.
Yeah,
I wonder how much of that is really because of like how limited they were from the console. Because like halfway through the development, they switched their focus to console. They probably, I mean, I'm sure if they stuck with the PC version, we probably would have gotten something like that. But I think a lot of the limitations of the console makes it really difficult for them to expand the maps. I mean, they can barely put more people, let alone, make the maps any bigger.
I think Jake's right.
It's a good point. And do you think that, obviously coming up with the PS4, that's going to be less of an issue? So it's going to be much more, Battlefield 4 is going to be a more enjoyable sort of experience all around for PC and console gamers alike.
I was going to say, is it really coming out for PS4? Isn't it coming out for all the systems, like including PS3?
Yeah, that's true, actually. I mean, well, we've seen that they've said that they're talking about beta, and that's coming out this year, and so on and so on. But there has been a lot of talk about certain games coming out around this time. Now, if the beta for Battlefield 4 is not coming out till the kind of autumn this year, well, they're talking about the PS4 releasing. So, I mean, I've spoken to a few people in terms of kind of, game scaling and so on. So you play it on the PS and then they're going to have another version. I mean, do you guys think that's going to be a realistic situation where you may have a PS3 beta and then it actually gets released for next gen? I mean, what do you think there?
Well,
I think if they don't release it for PS3, Xbox 360, and the next gen's consoles, they're missing out on sales. Because what percentage of the people are going to jump to next gen as soon as it comes out?
Exactly.
Half?
Yeah.
Even half is a small number.
Yeah.
I agree with X Factor here. When you look historically at PS3 and Xbox 360 sales with the first 6 months of their release, they're only selling combined maybe 2 to 3 million units. And you contrast that with the expectations that Battlefield 3 had, where they'd sell maybe 6 to 8 million units total within the current generation consoles, excluding PC for a moment, and then realize that Battlefield is other than FIFA is their flagship product. And if they're going in with this BF4 with the expectation that they're only going to sell maybe 5 or 6 million units, it means that they either are expecting a huge amount of DLCs or premium-like services that are going to last for years, or that they simply are thinking this is just going to be a stopgap measure until the next Battlefield effort, Battlefield 5 or Bad Company 3, whatever it may be.
And going into this is a publicly traded company where growth is an expectation. It's not a hope, it's an expectation. So you sell 15, 16, 17 million copies of BF3. How do you go sell 22 to 25? You've got to design it for next gen. You've got to design it for current Xbox or current PS3. If not, you're not going to hit those sales numbers because people don't have the units, right? They don't have the new gen. And you have to think about production limitations. How many Xboxes and how many PS4s can be created in a timely fashion to hit the market, and what will it take sales-wise to dry that up? Yeah. It's happened every release of Xbox and PlayStation, right? They make them, people buy them up. It's like the new video cards, the new NVIDIA series, when that first hit the market, gone. The new AMD series, gone. Within days, and then it was dry for 2 to 3 weeks. No one could get their hands on anything. So there's a lot of money-based decisions that EA and the developers have to make to utilize the new tech and the old tech.
Yeah, they would have to have some kind of business case that says that the amount of money that they're going to make in the long term off the DLCs or some other mechanism they use to take that cash and get it quickly is going to justify the fact that they're not going to get a fraction of the sales that they usually get. Now, granted, when they sell at their copy at a GameStop, they're going to make a whole lot less money than when they sell through Origin. And if they can get enough of those online sales, then maybe it closes. But again, I have to think that a critical component of this is going to be some kind of long-term Battlefield 3 premium-like offering that gives them a lot of cash within the first few months and then allows them to slow roll out DLCs and updates for 18 months, for 24 months, for 36 months, because otherwise they're not going to make any money off it, and it's going to be bad.
Well, yes. Also remember, Medal of Honor's done. They buried that franchise. So what are they going to do to have what's the sales cycle going to be? Is what I'm getting at. Battlefield used to be a 1 to 2 year sales cycle because they figured a Medal of Honor game would come around. Now what is it? Now do they start spitting out Bad Company 3 and 2143? What's their play? I'm interested to see what the next play is for the DICE franchise.
It is an interesting idea, and I don't know. I mean, just briefly to say before we talk about that, I cannot see how they could release Battlefield 4 for PlayStation 3. I don't see it. I mean, if they're going to do it,
just has to happen.
I know, and that's what worries me. I mean, I can see that. I can see that they have to do it in terms of, like Dasgro and Rival have said that, when a new system comes out, there will just simply not be the weight of players there to buy these games coming out. On the other hand, when we have expectations of what they should be doing when the next game comes around, it's going to have to be markedly improved. It's going to have significant improvements to player count, graphics, the general dynamic and overall feel of the game. I don't see how they can do that with the PS3. But like you say,
I'm not that worried about PlayStation 3 per se. The real bottleneck for current generation consoles is definitely Xbox 360
Microsoft.
with its 512 megs of RAM. I mean, do you guys foresee a scenario where they may release her for PS3? Because PS3, from a capability perspective, has more breathing room and not release it, for instance, for Xbox 360.
That's an interesting one. I mean, they would have to max out the spec on PS. They would literally have to get every single drop out of the system, and I still don't think it would be enough. But
here's how I see it. I see it like this: if you look at Battlefield 3 on PC and you look at it on console, there's a huge gap, a giant gap.
Yeah.
So essentially what you're going to do is you're going to bridge that gap between next-gen consoles and PC, but then you're still going to have the gap on the old system. So essentially, if you buy the new one, you're going to be, playing an updated version of Battlefield 3. I think that's going to just have to be a given.
But I'm just kind of curious how they can develop a game which would have to be so significantly different, and it would have to be so toned down. I mean, it feels, to my mind, that would almost be like developing two completely separate games, and I just don't see that.
Oh, it would be.
Exactly. And I just don't see that. I can't imagine, unless they've just grabbed all the Medal of Honor stuff and you put them in a corner, whipping them, going, yeah, okay, make this shit game. Just
yeah.
I mean,
and they're in a tough decision. EA has a tough decision. Do we design for the future? Or do we design for the now?
Yeah.
The now is where the money's at, right here. Everybody's got the Xbox 360. Everybody's got a PS3. That's low-lying fruit, right, on the tree. So they have a tough choice, because I don't think they can do all three: PC, old gen console, new gen console. I don't think they can.
No, I don't think they can either.
From what I've heard, though, they've really been ramping up the development team at DICE. They've brought in people from Danger Close, because obviously Medal of Honor is not there anymore. But
they stripped it down, yeah.
Yeah, they're basically pulling people off other projects, bringing them into DICE to kind of say, okay, go off in a corner and code this for the old consoles, and we'll worry about the new ones. So I really think that.
EA has made comments, though, about Frostbite 2 engine and how it will be the engine for next generation consoles for all their franchises, not just Battlefield. And I think when you look at that and then you start looking at the rumors that Xbox, the next generation Xbox or PS4 will both have HTML5 based interfaces, it makes their Battlelog acquisition a year ago a whole lot. It makes a lot more sense, because then they can then create a unified online HTML5 based interface for all their games and allow, at least on the menu interface side, very quick updating, because it's all a website. I think that they are putting all their money into Frostbite 2 and into the Battlelog like system. And if it doesn't work, or if it doesn't produce those kinds of sales, they may be in trouble.
Something else to bring in here was that earlier this week I made a very short video talking about Grand Theft Auto 5, and in that video I basically said, okay, we all know it's been delayed, but the question I put to my subscribers was, does that matter to you? Does it matter that you're going to have to wait 6 or more months for this game? Does it piss you off, or what? And 99% of everyone came back and said you could delay it a year and I'd still be happy, because as far as people are concerned, what they want is they want quality games. They don't care about it coming out. Obviously there's a kind of point where you say, okay, enough is enough. If a game is taking 3, 4, 5 years or whatever to come out, but essentially what people are saying is they would rather wait a bit more and have a better game than see games turned out.
I think that's the minority, though, because if you look at Call of Duty, and that completely proves that thesis wrong, because I mean, it comes out on a yearly basis and people want more. When I think about it, I would be pretty devastated if I had to wait an extra year for Battlefield 4, honestly, because I'm getting pretty tired of Battlefield 3.
But don't you think that sometimes a game like Battlefield, you see what they've done with the DLCs, which just keeps you contented. Often, I mean, and look at Crysis. There were so many people saying that Crysis 3 is just Crysis 2.1, and we've heard this before with COD, with so many people. Now, look, nobody's saying that if they didn't put these games out there, people wouldn't buy them. Of course they would. Christ, you put anything out there with that name on it, people are going to buy it. Yeah, it's as simple as that. If you want to bring it down to that level. However, look at what Battlefield has done with its premium service and releasing DLCs across that. That's really extended its lifespan. And I don't see why they couldn't do that. I think if they start going to a yearly model, which I have to say I do not think will happen, but if they did, I think it would be a mistake. I think it would compromise everything, and I think it would undermine all the good work that they've done so far. I don't think they will do it. I just don't think they will.
I don't think they can do a yearly model. I don't think they planned on Medal of Honor flopping is what happened. I think what you'll get is you'll get a mix of Bad Company, 2140 whatever, and then the next Battlefield title rotating. Maybe the Bad Company and 2143-ish titles rotate within 2 years of each other. Yeah. And then Battlefield's within 2 years of each other, right? So you've constantly got a new title. I think
that's realistic every 2 years. Because like I brought up this point before. In today's development world, as far as games go, you have to be good enough to develop on a 2-year cycle. That's just the nature of the business. I mean, I think Activision has proven that. It's like most good development teams, they can churn out a good game in 2 years. It's just really like how they use the time and what they kind of invest towards it. And I think that DICE probably won't go to that. I think what they'll end up doing is splitting DICE into two and having Bad Company 3 or whatever being the stopgap. Maybe it won't sell as much, but then you'll come back a year later and boom, Battlefield 5.
I would appreciate that so much because I have spoken a lot about this as well, the idea that so many games got into the habit of tacking on multiplayer or tacking on a campaign to a game which is essentially one thing. And we all know that Battlefield basically, it used to be primarily just a multiplayer game. And I would love for them to do this kind of 2-year release where they have just a multiplayer game and then they take the Bad Company aspect, which everybody loved that. Nobody liked the Battlefield 3 storyline. It was kind of fairly generic and people didn't really get on board with it. But people love the Bad Company storyline. I would love to see that. Have a single player campaign game and really sell that strong, sell the story strong, the characters and everything, sell that and then do a big multiplayer game on top. I would love that. Sorry, Daskar, go on, man.
Oh, we just have to remember that a half decade ago, DICE had two studios. They had DICE in Stockholm and they had DICE Canada. DICE Canada did 2142. And DICE did everything else. And then after the EA acquisition, shortly afterward, they shuttered DICE Canada, which then formed what was it, Chaos Studios, and with THQ, and they did their own thing. And on that note,
RIP.
One of the things about THQ when they went bankrupt, we did not see EA buy any of their flagship products.
Yep.
Now there could have been a bidding war. We didn't know about it. Maybe not. But to X Factor's point, there is an expectation that they need to put out some flagship titles at a regular basis, and if they're not going inorganic by buying some properties from the now defunct THQ, then clearly they think they can do it internally.
Yeah.
Well, one interesting point that you brought that up is because I've actually been reading that Chaos did 2142. You said they were DICE Canada because didn't they do Homefront?
Yes.
And an interesting thing is EA and Crytek are in bed together. And essentially, Crytek now owns the rights to Homefront. So I would not be surprised if Homefront is what we see next year, published by EA. And that's going to be how they recoup the losses from Medal of Honor. Because honestly, I don't know if they can churn out a Bad Company 2 at this point unless they've had it in the works for a while.
Yeah, in the works. I see what you did there. Okay. Another interesting thing, didn't Crytek come out this week and say that they will only produce free-to-play games from now on? But I think they did come out and say that. So if they did produce more titles like Homefront, I would assume that they would stick to their statement. It would be free to play.
Homefront was a good game. I was underrated.
I missed it, I have to say. Yeah, I didn't get on board.
Well, I was a big fan of Frontline's Fuel of War, which was also done in the same studio. It really represented, in my mind, what 2142 should have been, but wasn't. But unfortunately, it didn't get the sales because it didn't have the big studio behind it. But nonetheless, though, I think you're onto something, Jake. I think you're onto something.
Well, tell us about Homefront, Jake, because I missed that totally. I didn't miss it, but I made a conscious choice not to get it because I thought it looked too coddish, to be frank. But
it wasn't really. It was more like Battlefield. It was on a smaller scale because there were some limitations. It's written by the Red Dawn guys, and essentially North Korea invades the U.S. and we're in the point where we're isolated groups of people. We're not necessarily taken over. That's not the correct way to explain it, but that's kind of like the atmosphere of the story, which isn't really that important. But the multiplayer was decent. It had a lot of potential. It pretty much introduced the score streak stuff that you see in like Modern Warfare 3 or like Medal of Honor used it even, where like you get rewarded for playing the objective.
Yeah.
And you could unlock, instead of like going and like in Battlefield, you run up to your tank and you jump in, you actually bought your tank with these points that you've earned by skill measures, I guess. And it was actually cool, but there were a lot of issues with servers. I have it on PC and Xbox, and both of them struggled from like not having enough servers to meet the demand of sales because it actually sold really, really well. But it was overall a good game, and I think that that could be something that we might see plug the gap. Because if Crytek's developing the game, I think it could be a lot better than what we saw out of Chaos. Not to say that Chaos did a bad job, but they were obviously rushed by THQ because of the financial problems. But I mean, I could see it being a possibility. I don't know if it'll come true. I mean, that's mostly just me speculating, but it's definitely something to think about.
You would think that these developers, would learn to stop rushing titles. If they need another 3 months, take it. They need 6, take it, because it kills franchises. You can grow a franchise, right? And the second you have a shitty title, it's declining sales from there on out, right? Because bitter
Medal of
people
Honor.
don't buy again. And Rival Cartel said it best. Somebody goes, "Hey, Cartel, you getting the new Medal of Honor game?" He goes, "No, they owe me $50 from the last pile of shit you created."
Yeah, seriously. I have to say I was so on board with him, and it's exactly what I said at the time. And I said, they'd have had to have made an unbelievable turnaround to produce a game this time, which was worth me getting. Turns
Last
out,
one was crap.
Turns out it wasn't worth it, and it was proved correct. But I think with all of these things, it just, they need to get some sense. And there's so many developers which come out with these things, and you're like, what? What are you doing? It baffles me. And when it comes down to things like fixing the game, taking extra time to do it, they need to do it. Take an extra 6 months. People will support you doing it. People will support you doing it. If you put the game out, sure, people are going to buy it. Seriously, they will. People will buy it whenever you put it out there. So from that logic, take the extra time to make it worthwhile so that when people buy it, they think, Jesus, this was well worth waiting for,
I think with Medal of Honor, I can't believe they would allow that to happen because it was such a fragile franchise to begin with. I mean, the last one was god awful, and I mean, it had its moments, obviously, but for the most part, that was god awful. And that they were on thin ice. They basically said, this is their last chance, and they rushed it, and it died, and now it's gone. It's
Do you know the worst thing about that was that whilst I didn't have any faith in it actually being any good, I think it was a hugely missed opportunity, because I think that the concept and the premise of what that title was actually good. And I think that, had they improved all of the other little things that failed all around, like the kind of poor graphics, the bad dynamic of the game, all this sort of stuff, the servers and what have you, I don't know. I mean, there was loads of stuff, like Level pointed out, I think, about kind of the menu systems when I spoke to him like off the record about things and all these kind of things. But I don't know, I felt like they had the level of innovation and concept. They had like the vision. They just didn't follow it through, and it was disappointing for me. Just to kind of not disappointing for me in terms of I was looking forward to it. Just disappointing because I saw the opportunity they had and they just screwed it up. And
the ideas were there. The execution was not.
Exactly.
The delivery was not. The idea was there.
They obviously didn't know how to handle that engine. That's the first thing I noticed.
That menu system was horrible. Horrible. Getting in a party. I mean, all the stuff.
To be fair, they have fixed that now, because I actually played it like a month ago and they updated the UI and they made it a lot better. But I mean, who's playing that game now? Nobody.
It's too little, too late. There are less than 4,000 players online a night based on the stats. That's horrible.
Yeah,
I bet you there's closer to 1,000 at this point. I mean,
you're probably right. There's a site you could pull it up, and this is when it launched. It was 4,000 to 6,000 when it launched.
Because when the DLC came out, I hopped on there and I was like, where are the players? Shouldn't there be like a ton of players for DLC? And nope. Everyone had
But this is what
I
mean, and this is what I can't understand. I mean, people would have had to sign this off. That's the thing. People would have looked at it and gone, yeah, we're totally happy with that. It's good to go. And that's what I can never get my head around, you know. I mean, just look at, I mean, a great example, this is a bit of a sidetrack, but a great example, I was playing Far Cry 3 earlier this week, and one of my new guns, I decided to put a new optic on it. I put the optic on it. I was like, what the hell is this? I can't even see through it. It was like a very, very small reticule. It had this fluorescent blue crosshair, and I was like, this is shit. I just used the iron sights. I just took it off. It wasted $400 buying it or whatever. But I was just like, seriously. And I actually I was recording live the comms, you know, and I said this to the guys, my subscribers at the time. I said, what the hell? The developer has made a choice. They've obviously, you know, they've created everything in the game and approved it. So someone at some point has taken that item and gone, yes, this is what we want in the game. And that's what I can never get my head around. When you see stuff that you can never understand, like someone going, yes, we're happy with that, and it still gets approved. I just can't understand it. Desco, Battlefield 4, what's one of the biggest things that you might look forward to? What's one of the things that you think would be the best to have, you know, moving on from where we are now?
Well, I'm going to repeat the same thing that I always repeat, which is I want to see more competitive features. I want to see a matchmaking mode. I want to see spectator mode and battle recorder. I want to see.
Shit we had 10 years ago.
They have to do it now though, because PS4 supports spectating.
Plus they got passed by MLG, and BF3 really made an MLG push, and MLG says, well, you guys are working on spectate mode, right? Yeah, we're going to have it done soon. We'll come back to us when you got done. And MLG just snubbed them from that point on. No spectate, we don't pick you up.
Yeah,
especially with how much support Black Ops gave them. I mean, there's no reason to pick Battlefield 3.
Now, out of all those accessibility things, I'd like to see spectator mode, I'd like to see battle recorder, but I would love to see some kind of skill-based metric that does a ranking system where it's not just level 50s only can be in a given server. I want to have a real deal ranking system similar to, let's say, how League of Legends works, Heroes of New Earth, or
ESL versus.
Or ESL versus, yes. Where if you want to play and you can get into a server, it will pair you with people that maybe be a little bit better than you, a little bit worse than you, but it's going to provide this ideal experience where you're not going to be playing against these super great players that are going to ruin your experience and make you leave in frustration playing our game, or alternatively get real bored because you're just killing people who are really bad at the game, and you just get bored because it's just a grind at that point.
Yeah, that's different. I mean, but that's surely going to be based on stats, right? I mean, how else would you do it?
Losses, and the way ESL versus works, number one, it has its own anti-cheat system built in, right? And number two, it has a ranking system where as you win and you lose in the interactions with other players, it kind of rates you, right, on a point system. And then it pairs you up when you're playing other people in a average. Your team gets an average, and then it kind of pairs you up. So you'll never play super highs unless there's no one on, and you won't play what they call low bobs, right, if you are super high unless no one's on. So the matches can be somewhat good matchups, but it's always a flip of the coin when it comes to playing 5v5 or 8v8 or whatever mode they're playing on ESL. 4v4.
Let me share an anecdote about old school Dota All Stars from StarCraft Brood Wars, or not. We're not StarCraft Brood Wars. Go Warcraft 3 Frozen Throne. Pardon me. And in this, you join these servers where there was no matchmaking system, at least not core within the game, and you'd play these matches, these 5v5s, and the amount of rage I felt when playing this, I haven't felt this kind of rage in Battlefield 3 ever, but I would regularly feel this kind of
I would like to see that
of unthrottled rage because I'm playing against a guy who doesn't know how to play his hero, or playing against and he doesn't run his lane, and he gets killed, and he's feeding the enemy team, and they get leveled up faster than I do, and then
he gets killed. They're leveling up.
And
I don't know what Battlefield you've been playing.
I was going to say, yeah, seriously. I was going to say it's like every single game for me.
No, but it's 30 minutes down the drain. Now with new MOBAs out there, with Dota 2 and Heroes of New Earth and League of Legends, they create these matchmaking systems to try to prevent that. And I think they've done a pretty good job at it. I've put in a few hundred hours in these kind of MOBAs in the last 2-3 years, and it's something that I think does have some applicability to Battlefield's first-person shooter. I'm not saying you do it outright, you do it for everything, because I want to be able to take a guy who's never played before and play with me if he's a friend of mine and we want to just have a fun experience. But
I think it would have to be an option to kind of toggle it on and off.
yeah.
It'd be a menu thing
Be
you
like
can
a
choose to do.
playlist or
Yeah,
something.
exactly.
Well, we have ranked servers. Why not have
yeah, exactly.
skill servers
Well,
or whatever it may be?
Yeah, you just check it and it would start putting you into that
I
stuff.
mean, Halo does a pretty rough rendition of that. I mean, it's not advanced like you guys say, but they have the true skill type thing, which takes into account like your win loss, your
if
your KD ratio, your score per minute, all those weird.
I think when you start taking stats, you have to be very careful about which ones you choose. I mean, because people regularly are talking about stats this, stats that.
Well, they can also
you guys know that.
manipulate it. You know,
Yes,
for
for
instance,
sure.
we play a lot of ESL stuff, and there's a group of guys over there. They have on their battle log 40 to 45% accuracies, but that's not applicable in competitive play. You're going to get your face shot off trying to pick out that perfect shot where you land your 4 to 5 bullets, you get a kill, right? So and it's if you go in and manipulate your stats like that, those aren't realistic numbers.
No,
right?
I've talked about this endlessly, and I've talked about how I would happily see stats gone. However, I do understand they have a place. I do understand they have some relevance. I mean, people say to me that, okay, sure, your stats are always going to be relevant to a degree, so long as you're not hardcore stat padding them. And I think that's fairly true. I mean, it just depends on but it also depends on your play style. Are you the kind of player who naturally hangs back a little bit? Are you the kind of kamikaze guy who runs up there with all guns blazing, just kicking it up? It does depend a little bit, but I would really support any kind of, this option to have some kind of system, provided it was done sensibly and with a little bit of forethought, not just let's look at your stats, But I mean, you got to say, like, when you look at the way different games play out, I think people naturally want these kind of better, more kind of balanced games. They really do. And a great example is just my server that I run on the PlayStation. Now, the thing is, I get a lot of my subscribers and people that watch my kind of videos coming onto my server. So my server generally, naturally, we have more people playing the objective than on kind of default servers where it's just random players constantly. And I'm sure there are other I'm sure there are other servers out there, not just mine, that are similar, have a general theme to this. But it was a really good example this week. I was playing, and when I play on my server, all right, not every game. You're always going to have some games which are slightly imbalanced because you can't help that when players drop in and out. But for the most part, on my server, you do tend to get these more objective games, people really fighting hard. And I regularly get messages from people saying this was one of the best, games or nights that I've had playing Battlefield 3 on the PS3, just because of the way people are actually playing the game. And then last night I go on a few games, me and 3 guys in my squad, we just rolled through like 10 games in a row on this server. And, and then of course the other team just empties out. We tried a couple of other servers, the same deal. Either that or our team was so bad we were just instantly spawn camped on every map. And I think that's what I mean. It's just, it seems generally so imbalanced. They need to do something there, even if it's just a little, something.
Yeah, if they built in a better matchmaking system, like Dastro said, even for pugs, that might help. But again, when you're going into something where you play in a server that's got better talent, better competition, that slowly makes you a better player without you even realizing it 9 times out of 10.
Yeah.
You just get better. Yeah. And that's the only real way to excel at gaming on a competitive side is play teams that are better than you. If you play guys and just beat up on them all night, every day, what did you learn? Yeah. Everything works, right? But if you play a team that's better than you and you try a new push or you try a new setup and it doesn't work or you get your face shut off, you're going to learn from that.
Yeah, exactly. And this is why on my, my channel as well, I often put losses and stuff. I know Dasco breaks down videos loads about sort of looking at what happened in rounds and stuff. And it's this kind of deal. People are really interested in it. And I always say that you learn a lot more from a loss than you do from a win for the most part. I mean, you kind of, you see what went wrong here. Did I screw up? Was it my fault? Whose fault was it? Was it something that we could have actually controlled, or was it out of our control? All of these sort of things come into play. And another thing is that whenever I'm playing in games, if it's a public server or if it's my server, if our team is getting destroyed or if the enemy team is getting destroyed, and then I just see everybody empty out after one game, I just think, you haven't even tried. Like, I have seen many games. Again, I've got to use my server because I play on it a lot, but I've seen many games where we're on it and one team will get destroyed one round. But because, again, for the most part, people don't empty out quite so much, we play the next round, different map, and that team comes back quite strongly just because they have a different map, and also perhaps they took a bit on board from that last game. They thought, okay, the guys that we're playing, they're using armor a lot, or they're using a lot of this or a lot of that. We'll take
It's
that
time
on
to put
board.
down the 17 sniper rifles and get some
Yeah.
assault kits and engineers.
Exactly, and it genuinely happens. I've seen it. I've seen it on my server where we've had a very strong game. We've really kicked the enemy quite hard, and we go into the next game. All of a sudden, they're really throwing it back at us, and I've been quite impressed to see some players really sort of change their game up and really sort of throw it back. So I think that's the thing. I would like to see more of that. I think it's better to see that. And another little phrase of mine I often say is, I'd rather have a good loss than a bad win. I'd rather have a hard fought game which ends up in a lose than just a steamrolling win time after time, because there's nothing more boring than that when you're playing.
Okay, there was one last thing I did want to mention was that we were talking about this. I think Dascro actually mentioned that there was going to be HTML5 on the browser and stuff,
Yeah.
and they're going to integrate maybe Battlelog into it. Was that what you were kind of alluding to?
Yes, I think exactly what I was alluding to. One
So
common menu interface.
So essentially, like what I was thinking about while we were talking about it is if that happens and they're going to be able to update the game more frequently, that's going to be good for the PC side of things, because no longer are we going to have to wait 3 months between patches, because that drove
Yes.
me absolutely insane. Like, I think that was the biggest downfall of Battlefield 3 was the time we had to wait for stuff to get fixed. And I think if PS4 or Xbox 900 or whatever they call it comes out and they have that integrated into the game and we can actually get updates in real time, we don't have to sit around and wait 5 months to get the dark glitch fixed.
I mean, the patching thing is something that is actually quite a good point, and it's something that I haven't spoken about it very much for a long time, and I guess because we haven't really had many for quite a while now. But we remember in the beginning they kept rolling out these huge patches, but at very kind of long intervals. They would just wait and then hit us with a massive patch. So much things, so many things changed there. Going into Battlefield 4, do you think it would be better to change that and go with a much kind of more regular fixing system? I mean, to my mind, you make a small change, you can see its effect. But if you drop a bomb of changes,
massive changes.
Yeah,
I mean, how long did the dark glitch exist to the next DLC? I mean, stuff like this hangs around for 3 to 4 months. That's obviously broken, needs to be fixed. I would love to see a monthly patch.
Yeah, seriously,
that'd be amazing.
When they changed it all, they made it completely different. I mean, think about the Great Suppression. We got the dark glitch fixed, but then we got suppression.
Suppression was that 2.0? Was that
it
one?
was the second one. It was the one right after Tarkan.
It was horrible. And they even acknowledged, well, we think we tweaked it a little too far to the right.
Oh yeah, you think?
I can hit the next map rotation.
Yeah.
The map next rotation. I'm hitting a wall there someplace.
So at least they made the heavy barrel more prevalent when they did that.
I feel quite comfortable where they've changed things to now, but I don't think they did it in a very kind of organized way.
Too many broad strokes.
Yeah.
None precise strokes.
I feel like we went in a circle with it though. It's like we went to an extreme and then we came all the way back to the middle where they could have just done that to begin with.
What it was and what 2.0 was. I'd like to see the original suppression. Blurry screen, less deviation, but it's somewhat of an annoyance factor still, right? It's something you have to think of when it comes to knocking somebody off a head glitch spot or a power position.
I think they need to take a little bit more. Again, it comes back to the whole kind of waiting, but also waiting for things to release, but also having this sort of strength to kind of say, we're going to do this and this is how we want it to be. Now, they have kind of done that for the most part, but I feel like sometimes they just, they're pandering a little bit. And I think it's a very difficult line to sort of walk down as a developer anyway, where you have a huge community of people and they're all screaming, going, well, they don't like this, and then they change it one way, and then they piss off everyone else who wasn't talking, wasn't making any comment at the time, and then they want it changed back again. I think actually, there's been only a couple of quite severe things that really needed fixing, and most of those have been kind of weapon sort of imbalances, glitches, what have you. Overall, I think it's been fairly good, but I think with all those kind of small changes, like we say, it would have been fine to just make small tweaks. They didn't need to hit, they didn't need to, it seems like they've kind of taken things on board and go, well, that's one thing to fix. We'll put it on the list and, we'll do it all in one big go.
Well, I look forward to more frequent updates. I think that'll be good. And if it means that because of HTML5 or because the next gen consoles allow them to update faster, then I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, definitely. All right, guys. So this has been the Battlefield Roundtable today. Been joined by Dascro. I've been joined by NoX Media and Rival X Factor. Let us know what you think on all these topics. Are you interested? Are you excited about the new consoles? Are you looking forward to Battlefield 4? Have you had enough of Battlefield at this point? Talk about all the changes and the things that we've been seeing today, guys. Leave them in the comments. We'll have a look through and a read. Thanks again for watching, and see you next time for some more Battlefield Roundtable.